Have you found yourself navigating a dark night of the soul? Are you craving a deeper connection with the divine feminine? Are you ready to integrate the balanced union of the masculine and feminine within? Then let's get started on the journey towards wholeness to reclaim your sovereign soul. My name is Cynthia Clark. Over the past several decades, I have undergone many dark nights of the soul. My healing journey has been a reclamation of my sovereign divinity. Whether you're just starting out on your self-healing journey or have been exploring techniques for many years, Discover Divinity offers an opportunity to uncover the new possibilities for discovering and reclaiming the innate wisdom within. It is time to discover the new possibilities. It is time to discover you. In today's episode, we are talking about the sacred awakening that is happening on the planet today and the integration of the divine feminine into what is called the Aquarian Age. We're going to be discussing toxic patriarchy, what it is, and its impacts on the ego and the way that that's showing up today in our patterns and behaviors as humans. And following up at the end, we're going to be talking about some ways that we can show up today and move into a space of healing and balancing with the sacred union of both the masculine, the divine masculine, and the divine feminine energies. So let's get started on today's episode. Welcome to the Discover Divinity Podcast, Reclaim Your Sovereign Soul. I'm your host, Cynthia Clark with Discover Divinity and discoveringdivinity.com. Today's episode is called Awakening the Sacred Divine Feminine, Healing and Restoring the Wounds of Toxic Patriarchy. We are diving into a powerful journey of spiritual awakening, one that honors the return of the divine feminine. As we step into this Aquarian age, it's all about a time of balance and collective consciousness that we are being called to receive a healing balm that's inviting us to release the old painful belief patterns and move into this beginning of restoration, of peace, of balance, of harmony within ourselves and in society. And for thousands of years, patriarchy has dominated our societies and spiritual practices, suppressing the feminine essence, while fear, shame, manipulation, and control created veils of blindness, causing us to forget the sacred power of the divine feminine. Now we are awakening from this deep sleep, reclaiming our spiritual sovereignty and restoring harmony between the masculine and feminine energies. And in our last episode, I shared a little bit about my journey, about what brought me into my deep passion about the divine feminine, as well as the journey that I really went on to uncover that and come into a space where it really is part of my mission on the planet to help individuals integrate that sacred beloved dance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine energies together, and to begin to come back into that space of the inner wisdom from within and connecting into that great sacred space of awareness and intuition. Now, when I shared in the last episode a little bit about the passing of my father, the shock and the trauma that brought on in my life, as well as a connection into autoimmune diagnoses, it was through many, many decades. It was kind of like an opening where I did not grow up with my father, and we didn't have a lot of pieces of his story or his life shared because that was tucked away with the way that my mom handled that experience. And I love my mother. She has been an amazing rock and powerhouse for me throughout my life. And so I share this only because this is quite a common pattern that can happen in a process of death. Many times that surviving parent will go on and get into a survival mode where they do anything and everything to begin to try to take care of their family, and a lot of those emotions or things get repressed. And in my situation, I didn't really have a lot of information about my father, and it wasn't until later on when I gave myself that freedom to really come into a space of knowing and understanding who my father was that I began to find miracles in my life, where I began to notice that my body began to heal. And it burst into my passion of what I do with Discover Divinity and what I have been doing for years to bring holistic healing to others. And it's been an evolving journey, but it's been kind of a parallel going through kind of the same experience with the divine feminine, growing up in a religious environment where a male figure of God was really that central focus, and what was called the priesthood was reserved exclusively for men. There was a disconnect. I didn't have teachings or role models that really connected me to the divine feminine, and I was taught that men were the leaders, the spiritual authorities, the keepers of keys, and eventually, left me feeling like a part of me was missing, just like I had felt with my father. I felt a longing or a missing until I finally gave myself permission to go on really a discovery process of learning who he was. And as I learned who he was, I learned those parts of myself that I was. And so as I've gone into this space of uncovering bits and pieces and parts that have been hidden from society for so many years, it has just opened me up into such an honor and a revering of this aspect of the divine feminine that really is coming out in this Aquarian age. And those of you that know me, or as you get to know me more on this podcast, you're going to know my nerding out that I get into different personality systems as well as astrology, and my sun and moon in astrology is Aquarius energy. And so it is in alignment with my purpose and passion to be a part, an honor to come into this space of the integration of the Aquarians. So as I have learned more about the pure love source, healing light of the divine, and this beautiful sacred dance of the divine feminine, the divine masculine energies, it has been a necessary key piece of my life to integrate this divine feminine energy. And it's not to me about having one or other be a more dominant source. It's about taking both of those and helping us bring a space of balance. And so as you are listening to today's podcast, I encourage you to reflect on your own journey, maybe a space where you have felt disconnected from the divine in general, or maybe you have been disconnected from the divine feminine because of different spiritual experiences or perhaps religious experiences that you have had. And maybe ask yourself the question, are there aspects of your spiritual life that have been suppressed or diminished because of the toxic aspects? So let's get started in the rest of today's episode. Today, I am going to kind of give you a little bit of a breakdown of what I will be sharing with you today. And first of all, I'm going to explain to you what patriarchy is, and then the historical aspects of what toxic patriarchy has done and the toxic impacts that it has created. Because I'm not saying that all the aspects of patriarchy are bad, because patriarchy and matriarchy are beautiful energies. But what has happened through a society, ages of society, as it has moved into a toxic format. And so that is what I'm going to be addressing today. So please know that I'm not totally taking patriarchy as a whole and saying the whole thing has been a negative thing because there's positive aspects of patriarchy. There are positive aspects of matriarchy. But today we are going to be talking about toxic patriarchy and then go into, like I said, those impacts, but also the impact that the Aquarian Age has to help integrate the sacred dance of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine to heal the ego wounds of these toxic masculine and toxic feminine patterns that each of us has. So let's start with understanding a little bit more about patriarchy. Patriarchy, in its most basic definition, is a social system where power is concentrated in the hands of men, with men holding authority over women, children, and family structures. And it is a system where descent and inheritance are revered through the male line, and society is organized around the supremacy of father or eldest male. And at its core, patriarchy perpetuates the idea that men control a disproportionately large share of the power, while women are excluded from it or relegated to subservient roles. And in the societal framework, men are seen as the head of the family, and women are often seen as property, subjugated, confined, maybe to a specific class of roles, and dependent on a male authority for economic survival. And in The Creation of Patriarchy, a book written by Gerda Lerner, she shares, she was a pioneering historian that dives into deep history of patriarchy using archaeological, literary, historical evidence to trace its origins. And in her book, she reveals that prior to 3100 BCE, human societies revered goddess worship and the power of women's reproduction. But over time, as men began to accumulate property, land, and women, they established legal codes and subordinated women, forcing them into roles of sexual subordination, slavery, or concubines. This patriarchal shift gave rise to a system where women's worth was determined by their reproductive and their sexual capacities, while their spiritual and social power was stripped away. The impact of the shift has been felt across centuries, and particularly in the violent reigns of the Roman and Greek empires, where power, war, and control over women's bodies became central forces in society. So you can see where this toxic patriarchy has created systems of manipulation, shame, and fear to maintain control. And we can still see those echoes in our society today. The cool part about this now is that we do have an opportunity. We have a pivot point in our history in this time. And so as we enter the Aquarian Age is all about a time of balance, a collective consciousness. We have the opportunity to heal from the toxic legacy that patriarchy has brought upon us. And this new era invites us to reconnect with the divine feminine, an energy that has been so suppressed for thousands of years. And it is now returning with the power to heal both individually and collectively. The Aquarian Age is an opportunity for us to step into transformation, a chance for us to really reclaim the spiritual sovereignty and balance to restore harmony between masculine and feminine energies. So as we are going a little bit deeper in this episode, we're going to explore some of the deep history of patriarchy and how it shaped our societies and the lasting impact it's had on our spirituality as well as our social consciousness. And we're going to get into a little bit more about how to reconnect with that divine feminine as we're moving on to help us heal, transform, and create more balance and a more enlightened world. And I may dive in a little bit deeper into another podcast episode about the Aquarian Age, but we'll start to tap into that to be able to help us honor both that masculine and feminine equally so that we can have, when you think about balance skills, it is about bringing that back more into the union from within. So let's go a little bit into the history of patriarchy. I'm not going to be able to cover everything here, but I wanted to just gently touch on the toxic aspects. So we see the rise of patriarchy that was present in an ancient civilization. The Roman Empire, for instance, is a structure that institutionalized patriarchy by establishing laws where it granted men control over property, maybe their inheritance and the lives of their families, and women were seen as property. They weren't able to buy land or make decisions for themselves, and it further impounded a really entrenched aspect of male dominance where women's voices were silenced and their spiritual roles were minimized. When we look at Christianity as a whole, as it spread across the Roman Empire, the worship of goddesses or any goddess was replaced. When the Roman Empire stepped in, they shut all of that out and they focused mainly on a male god. It was first singular and then later as an exclusive authority. So the goddess was no longer revered and female spiritual figures were suppressed. In ancient Greece, goddesses like Athena, that were central figures of wisdom and war, were lost because those male deities took precedence. Another example that I wanted to share were the perspectives of the Gnostic aspects or the lost books, particularly the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, that depicts Mary as a spiritual leader with deep wisdom, often in direct communication with Jesus. And these texts were deemed heretical and they were excluded from the Christian canon, further diminishing the role of women in spiritual leadership. And then in the early Christian church, patriarchal authorities feared the empowerment of women through these teachings, and they chose to suppress them. Another example is during the Inquisition, there were millions of women who were using their spiritual gifts that were accused of witchcraft and were executed. Many of these women were healers. They were midwives. They were wise women. They were keepers of Earth's ancient knowledge and intuitive wisdom. And there was such a great fear of feminine power at this time that led to probably one of the darkest chapters that we've had in history, where women were systematically tortured and killed for challenging the patriarchal control. The next example I would like to share is when European colonists arrived in the Americas, Africa, Asia, there was an encountering of indigenous cultures where women held significant political, spiritual, social power. And these cultures practiced gender equality, or even the structure of matriarchy that I've mentioned, where women were revered. They held roles where they were heads of tribes. They were the spiritual leaders. And because of colonialism, these forces, driven by the patriarchal Christian ideals, sought to dismantle any of these systems and replace them with male-dominated hierarchies. One more that I wanted to share is when we experienced the Industrial Revolution and capitalism. And this time brought about a lot of separation between public and private spheres. So men worked in factories and offices while women were increasingly expected to stay home, to raise children, to tend to the household duties. And this division reinforced any patriarchal beliefs that women's roles were to nurture and men's roles were to provide and lead. What has happened through these destructive examples is the imbalance. And so where we can go with this is recognizing both the patriarchal and matriarchal energies that I've discussed up to this point. They each have an inherent beauty when they are in harmony and balance. Patriarchy, with its emphasis on structure, leadership, and order, can provide stability. It can provide protection when it's aligned with wisdom and compassion. And matriarchy, on the other hand, its focus on nurturing, intuition, interconnectedness, brings forth the power of care, healing, community. And when we look at where these things have been imbalanced, these are the toxic effects that emerge when ego steps in, right? Ego is all about self-serving, it's power-driven, it's disconnected from the higher consciousness that dominates either of those energies. And so when either of those masculine or feminine energies is unchecked by a balanced structure, it leads to imbalances that create a distortion. And patriarchy in its toxic form has led to the control, domination, and exclusion, while toxic matriarchy, if it was led to its toxic aspects, could lead to manipulation, excessive dependency, and the stifling of individual growth. And so we can see that both of these structures, when in their toxic forms, and the ego takes the lead, whether it's the patriarchal or matriarchal systems, can move into a harmful structure. And so whether it's the desire for control in patriarchal systems or desire for power and control in matriarchal structures, it disrupts the natural flow of energy and causes harm. So control and domination in any form do not work. These structures disconnect us from our higher self and prevent this harmony, an interplay of both of these energies. The next thing that I wanted to discuss were some of the ego wounds that we carry today as a result of living in these distorted systems for thousands of years. We carry ego wounds that stem from these toxic dynamics, and these wounds are imprinted not only in our individual psyche but as a collective consciousness. So the stories of our ancestors, the pain, the traumas, the imbalances are encoded in our DNA. And as we awaken or wake up into that divine sacred feminine, we open the door to healing these wounds. The awakening invites us to restore the beautiful dance between divine sacred masculine and divine sacred feminine energies, allowing them to work in harmony rather than opposition. The sacred feminine is not about suppression of the divine sacred masculine and vice versa. Together, they create a synergy that elevates humanity into a state of wholeness and spiritual sovereignty. But before we can experience this, we have to identify and heal the ego wounds that have kept us trapped in patterns of distortion. So let's start by talking about a few of the ego wounds. And these ego wounds have been carried both by men and women. Individually, we are feminine and masculine beings. And so these wounds have manifested in ways that we interact with ourselves and others in toxic patterns. And these toxic structures of the past have also created specific wounds that are tied to our gender roles, maybe societal expectations and personal experiences. So I'll just list, a handful of some of the ego wounds, and there's many more, but this is to get us started here. Some of the feminine ego wounds are the frequencies of victim, codependent, insecure, manipulative, passive, overly emotional, acquiescent, inauthentic, and cruel. Some of the masculine ego wounds are that role of persecutor, cold detachment, controlling, egotistical, aggressive, emotionally numb, dominating, abusive, ruthless. There's so many more, but being able to go back and recognize, okay, what patterns or traits do I carry individually, to recognize where we are showing up so that we can make change. I always believe that awareness is the first step to change. We are currently entering this Aquarian age that I have spoken of, and it really is that period of spiritual awakening and transformation. It's the time where we're shifting out of the old Piscean paradigm, which was defined by separation, control, and dominance, and into the new age that's characterized by unity, equality, and shared wisdom. And this really is the time for reawakening the divine feminine and an energy that is equal to the divine masculine and essential to restoring this harmony in the world. And the Aquarian Age really is all about bringing back that divine feminine into balance. And this isn't just about women. This is reawakening the qualities that are often associated with the feminine, like intuition or compassion, creativity, nurturing energies. And as we embrace these aspects, we restore balance within ourselves and our communities. And it is that time that we get to invite masculine and feminine as honored equal forces in a spiritual and social and transformative evolution and spherical change. Healing these wounds requires us to dive deep. Today's all about diving deep, and awareness is the first step. And so when you can be aware, that allows us to go even deeper into the consciousness so that we can release harmful patterns that have been imprinted on us and reclaim that inherited power. And this really is where I love the role that I play and the client work that I do. Individually, I do many remote sessions where I'm working with people all across different areas where we can work face-to-face on Zoom or on a phone call. And I have many clients come in person in my office. But this is a time that we really are able to intuitively pick up on some of those harmful patterns or those deeper roots that have been imprinted individually to help the individual awaken to this divine sacred feminine and embracing the feminine energy, but also embracing the masculine energy as well. And when we can balance out that divine masculine and divine feminine energies, it frees those distortions of the egos. It frees the ego wounds so that they can work in unison, harmony, and balance. And this process of healing involves that acknowledgement. Once you do have the awareness of maybe some of these toxic patterns, maybe some of these ego wounds that are present, once you go from awareness, you can turn into an acknowledgement and use the proper modalities, use the proper techniques to release that. But then also move into a space of, once you know something, you have the choice to do something better. It's moving forward to act from a place of love, wisdom, and balance, and not staying stuck in a shame-based structure that's beating yourself up for showing up any other way. You get to choose to show up in a way that you get to love and forgive yourself for maybe unhealthy ways that you've shown up in the world, but then allowing yourself to heal the ego wounds and step into your true power. Align with that soul purpose, that greater good, right? Stepping into the restoration of that balance between the divine masculine, divine feminine energies. And this journey really is about spiritual sovereignty, claiming your sovereign birthright. We've all been given this as a living, breathing being to step into that birthright, and how we are going to show up on the planet is our choice. We get to choose into that, but it is something that exists so that we can live in harmony with ourselves, each other, and the world around us. And as we as individuals are healing, taking that ownership, being aware, we are able to ripple out into the collective, to contributing to healing the world and ushering in that new era of balance and peace and unity. And so as we close today, I wanted to share a few things that you can do to get started on your journey. I truly encourage you, once you do go into that space of awareness and acknowledgement, is to participate or show up in a space where you are able to use specific modalities and opportunities to let go of those toxic patterns, to release some of the things that are encoded in the DNA, the ancestry, those parts of the inner child that carry many of these stories. And that really is my specialty, what I help individuals with all the time and showing up to do your work is what I would say step one would be, and being able to step in to releasing and letting go the toxic impacts, and then integrating in that sacred union and that sacred dance. Something else I wanted to share is being able to engage in different practices that cultivate your intuition, your creativity, your inner wisdom. And so that may look like you spending time in nature, meditating, maybe practicing in new creative hobbies that allow you to express your creativity or your emotions, your spiritual insights. Something else that you can do, not only for yourself, but as a collective, is really embracing this frequency of your own inner goddess. You'll find that as you do this in the energy of the Aquarian Age, is that you will be able to inspire and uplift others and come back into that space of unity. We need everyone to rise together. And so when each individual really is stepping into that empowerment, we have the ability to influence others, and balancing those feminine and masculine energies within. Paying attention to step in this reclamation. It's an essential energy that has been suppressed for far too long, and this is my passion. This is part of my mission on the planet, is to come into this space where we can take the beauty, like I said, of the patriarchal and matriarchal energies in society, both the masculine and feminine energies in society, so that we can, as a collective, start to heal. But then also as individuals, we can work with those masculine and feminine energies that lie within, so that we can coexist in harmony from the inside. And as we heal from the inside, we heal on the outside as well. And we create a world that can live in compassion, unity, and equality. And so I continue to encourage you to find ways to connect into this divine feminine and coming into that reclamation for yourself. And pay attention to what practices that you might be able to implement to reconnect you to this powerful energy. And so I am here, as always, to offer my resources as an intuitive guide and practitioner, and also through our future episodes that we're going to be having together to help you reclaim your spiritual sovereignty and embrace the balanced world that we are in a space of creating at this time. So thank you for joining me, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Discover Divinity Podcast. If this podcast resonates with you, I invite you to check out discoveringdivinity.com. You will find resources to reclaim your sacred, sovereign spirituality. Here, you can join the Discover Divinity community, where we have free online community classes, as well as done-for-you courses and programs. Navigating the unique personal path to wholeness can feel overwhelming at times. If you would like further support or are ready to take your healing empowerment to the next level, I offer one-on-one intuitive sessions in a variety of different packages, where we will discover, release, create, reclaim. Discover your innate wisdom that lies within. Release the imbalances that prevent you from living your truth. Create harmony in body, heart, mind, spirit, energy, and relationships. Reclaim your sovereign soul. It is time to discover new possibilities. It is time to discover you.